There's been some inconsistent teams in Australian sports. In a country so obsessed with the concept of salary caps, drafts, and even competition, no one side can be too good or too crap for too long, of course, with the exception of the Gold Coast Suns. And a certain era of the West Coast Eagles' time in the AFL is no different. Now, long-time viewers of this channel, all 5 of you, must think I'm referring to this: the worst best team ever. 2 bottom 2 finishes in between 2 finals appearances and whatever 2009 was. And yes, the post-Judd Eagles were one of the weirdest phenomena of AFL history. But the Subiaco boys have done weirder within a shorter span of time. Allow me to introduce you to the Eagles of the year 2000. First, a macro-scale view of their season, starting with their lineup. Dedicated GAZ-man viewers may recognise Chad Rintoul, Daniel Metropolis, Dean Kemp and Fraser Gehrig from their passing mentions, with Glass, Jakovic, Cousins, Gardner and Peter Matera also leading the line. This is their season by wins and losses, and it's actually quite a good start. They're 6-4 with 1 draw over the first 11, with all their losses coming to top 8 teams, which sounds fair enough. They sit 5th on the table, on track for 12 to 13 wins. Even if you're a pessimistic fan, you think they'll make the 8, if not just miss out slightly. But this is what they got. To go from essentially 6-4 to 1-10 is jarring, to say the least. But it speaks to the pure, weaponised inconsistency the Eagles were producing on an ironically consistent basis. To truly understand what's going on, we have to zoom in. As a team, statistically, there's not much of a picture being painted here. They're okay. Nothing more, nothing less. Sure, they sucked in the air and at stoppages and struggled to drive forward as a result, but they were clinical inside their 50. And despite that awful end to the season, they actually allowed the least marks inside the defensive 50 of anyone, bar that insane Essendon side. The big explanation for that second half slump was this: their talisman and explosive key forward Scott Cummings. Yes, he lost their round 9 fixture due to his woeful kicking, ironically Cumming not able to finish. But he booted 46 goals in his first 11. Then he got injured here, missed these games, got injured again here on his return, and didn't come back. And yes, it is ironic that Cummings missed the climax of the season, haha. With him in full flight though, they won 55% of their matches. Without him, they won 9%. Yes, they also lost Gardner and Cousins for significant chunks, but neither were as irreplaceable as Scott Cummings. This is a scatter graph, plotting the Eagles' winning or losing margin by the position of their opponent at the time of their matches. And it's strange. They let crap teams blow them out more than the winningest team of the AFL era. Now let's plot those margins out chronologically from the end of the season to the start. They end their season with a 70-point battering, but only lose the match before by a single point. Then some unremarkable losses before, a big win over the lousy Saints. But before that, a 71-point loss to the 12th placed Swans. Now, there's a lot between these teams, but not 157 points. A team that's this far above the complete worst should be able to at least compete with mediocrity. But they routinely let the most average teams walk across them while putting up fights against the very best. Before that were a couple of wins, a couple of losses, but it's the first 7 rounds that really put the 2000 Eagles in a different league. From the first bounce of their 2000 season, the Eagles went from a nice win to a small loss to a draw against one of the worst sides to have ever played the game. And then, over the course of a month, they did something special. Form reversals are the term given to the difference in margins between 2 consecutive games. For example, the Eagles' form reversals to kick off 2000 were -55 and 12. This is pretty standard. Their next form reversal was 114. Form reversals of 100 or more are uncommon, but certainly not unheard of. Form reversals of 178 or more are super rare. Why 178? Well, that's what it takes to get in the best and worst 20 form reversals of all time. On average, this sort of thing happens once every 3 years across the league. But it's only been done once in the last decade. For West Coast, it happened 3 times in 3 weeks. Keep in mind, most of these entries are either teams rebounding from their worst ever performance or teams that just finished demolishing a historically poor side. West Coast weren't doing either of those things. The best and worst 40 performances span decades, 98 years to be exact. But West Coast went from the 7th worst form reversal of all time, to the 6th best of all time, to the 20th worst of all time, all within 29 days. I've had to do the maths a few times on this one, so bear with me, but the rough odds of even getting on these lists is 1 in 1,444. The odds of tacking on another similar performance to double feature is about 1 in 57,000. And the odds of capping this off in a grand finale to have 3 30-goal margin turnarounds in a row exceeds 1 in 2 million. Mick Malthouse coached 2 premierships. John Worsfold assembled the Eagles' best ever squad. Adam Simpson completed one of the great grand final comebacks. But Ken Judge, the only other man to coach West Coast in the AFL era, masterminded 4 performances that were so much more unlikely than any of his other contemporaries could manage. And it gets even weirder. The 2 wins in that sequence were a dominant win against Fremantle in Derby 13, and a masterclass against Adelaide where Cummings single-handedly outscored the Crows. They faced both teams a second time in 2000, as back then the draws would just repeat verbatim from rounds 15 to 22. With the man who kicked 24 combined goals in the previous fixtures missing from the Eagles' forward line on both days, Adelaide powered home to win on a Friday night at Football Park, while the Dockers won a classic derby 2 weeks later. Melbourne increased their winning margin from their previous encounter, while Geelong couldn't quite establish the same dominance away from home. That 30-point loss was almost a win for the Eagles. As it was, the glimmering lights at the top of their monument to inconsistency had faded. Now, the odds of facing any pair of opponents twice with the 2000 draw system is about 1 in 5. Purely mathematically, the odds of losing a game is slightly worse than 50-50. So the odds of having 3 consecutive 30-goal form reversals, and then later drawing the 2 teams you demolished in that run again, and then losing both of those subsequent rematches, including losing one by a mere point, is 1 in 2.1 billion. If you placed a $5 bet on this and you won, they wouldn't just have to give you the betting agency, they'd have to give you the country it was based in. Based on those numbers, you'd be hard-pressed to find any footballing phenomenon throughout the history of the league rarer than that. And yet, despite Ken Judge's dual monuments to inconsistency, they still weren't the most volatile team that season. Ironically, it was the consistency in their inconsistency that cost them. It's difficult to create these ridiculous gaps week to week when you lose literally every week. Across the first 11 rounds, they are almost twice as volatile as their nearest neighbour. But as the Eagles bottomed out, their numbers died. The spike that almost redeemed them was in the middle of that cursed run back through the gauntlet of misery. But there's no denying them this. At their peak, the zenith of the wild flailing that was their 2000 season, the Eagles recorded 4 of the 5 most extreme form reversals of anyone that year. There is no logical explanation. This is a random number generator falling down a flight of stairs, breaking and displaying one last error message before the lights dim forever. This, alongside 2 bottom 4 finishes, was this team's and this man's legacy. Judge and his jury, the executioner. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like footy content, we've got plenty here and there's still plenty more to come. So stay tuned, and until next time, take care.